creative blending. So I know that some of you are very advanced, so apologies if I cover anything you already know. On creative blending, it is very much, if I was with my school students, I would actually be asking them at this point to put their books aside, because we want to use the nose, the mind and the heart, the intuition. So often the knowledge that we've got from our textbooks actually puts us off from doing that, because you're aware that, well, I must use this oil for that. But for great creative blending, we want to move away from that. The emphasis is on creative. So you'll be aware that there's so many essential oils, but in my blending over the last 25 years, I've developed a core. It's a bit like being an artist, where you have your palette that you generally work with. So I'm just going to quickly, before we get too far into it, just go through some of the essential oils I'm going to use tonight and some of the ingredients. And before we start on essential oils, you probably can't see this, but I've got some gold leaf here. Gold on its own, like silver, has therapeutic properties, and I love using that creatively with my aromatherapy blending. This gold is cake blending. You've probably had it on cocktails or posh gateaus, but I use it all the time in my blending. So I'll go through quickly some oils. Spearmint. In your aromatherapy training, you generally work with peppermint. The problem with peppermint, and I'll tell you about this side of things a bit more detail later, but peppermint, if it was a person, would be the overbearing, be the person that dominated. So peppermint is actually really hard to blend with, but spearmint, which is just that bit softer, is absolutely fabulous for blending with. So spearmint is my must go to for creative blending. I've got some bay here, very, very old fashioned, but I love it. So in male blends, and particularly for older clients, I really like using bay. I've got some ginger oil. Now, people are familiar with ginger from cooking and eating, and they think of it as being very hot and spicy. But actually, the essential oil is quite fruity, so it's completely different than you would expect, and I use that in a lot of creative floral blends. Got some benzoin here. I use benzoin so often. One of the nicest ones I've found is the Ashadi benzoin. Benzoin's not a true essential oil, and I'm going to send you some photographs later, but you can see how heavy it is there. It's like a heavy syrup. But you can get it more pourable. Obviously, that's not as pure as when you get it as heavy as that. The problem is, when it's like that, it's quite hard to use. And the way I use it is to put a stick in, like a cocktail stick, and then stir it into my blend. But benzoin in perfumery, creative blending, is known as a coffee house aroma. It's very warm and very comforting. So that's one that I use a lot, but you do have to watch it. Don't think because you're going for the best available that that's going to work for your blending, because it's so heavy and so syrupy, it's impossible to use. This isn't an essential oil. This is I use this on base oil. This is a sea buckthorn. Sea buckthorn is bright red, really dark red. So it's the equivalent of a food colouring, and I tend to put it in with some of my warming blends and some of my creative blends. It's got a really good marketing story, so it's fantastic to use and very therapeutic. Cinnamon, you've got to be very, very careful with that. Very good on candles and for room fragrancing. Not so good for your creative blending. You've got to be careful. Bergamot, nature's Prozac. If you look at all the modern perfumes, CK in particular, Diesel, all of them, they've got bergamot. Bergamot is liked as much by men as women, so I use that so often, particularly for younger people. Chamomile. Now, chamomile, people want it in their therapeutic blends because it is so beneficial, but the other thing about chamomile is that it's British. And as a brand developer, I often get asked, please put some British ingredients in. Chamomile is one I can. The problem with chamomile is the smell isn't particularly commercial, so it's quite hard to blend a nice commercial fragrance with it. But in terms of its therapeutic properties, I use it so often. And cedarwood, cedarwood Atlas, and the new one on the scene, cedarwood Himalayan. You've probably read that you've got to be very, very careful. Cedarwood has come into the new sort of eco issues for blending and for oils. But this Himalayan cedarwood is actually the cheapest cedarwood you can get, and it's much more rounded. So I've found my clients love it because it's got a much softer floral fragrance, and I use cedarwood so often. It's a good price, so people often blend, oh, I'm going to have sandalwood and rose in my blend. Well, that's all very well, but if you want to make a profit, which if we're doing aromatherapy as a business, we want to, you need to think about the cost of your oils. So cedarwood, a really good price, and cedarwood is the oil of strength and courage. They say that David anointed himself with cedarwood before he fought Goliath. And cedarwood trees you're familiar with. Cedarwood trees or cedarwood wood makes temples, and it also made chariots because it's impenetrable. And in Britain, before we put our money in banks, we used to put our money in cedarwood boxes. So I find if somebody's feeling let down or lacking courage or lacking confidence, I use cedarwood a lot. Green mandarin. Later on, I'm going to show you how to blend the smell of rose and the smell of neroli using cheaper oils. Now you might say, why would you do that? Well, on rose, you may well be aware that the allergens in rose are quite high. And there's been new rules come in the last 2 years. So all the rose facial products that I've made over the last 15-20 years, I've had to reformulate. And I'm now extremely good at making what I call the poor man's rose. So a bit later on, I'll show you how to make the poor man's rose and the poor man's neroli. And my Chinese students particularly love it because, you know, when you buy rose or neroli at 20 or 30 pounds, then you're frightened of using it. But if you can get that character and blend that fragrance and you still get lots of therapeutic benefits, then it's well worth it. Frankincense used to be used in church for slowing down the mind so that you would concentrate on what the priest was saying. So frankincense can be quite heavy. It's again, it's a very, a bit like peppermint, it can be very overbearing. So frankincense is one to be very careful with when you're doing your creative blending. Lang Lang, an aphrodisiac. I think of Lang Lang like the sugar in my blending. If I want to sweeten something, I use Lang Lang. On its own, it can be very overpowering, and a lot of people come to me and say, oh no, don't use Lang Lang, I can't stand it. But as soon as you put a citrus with it and sharpen it up, it's absolutely beautiful. And just a point while we're there, I've got some lemon. So if you want to know, this is really, really important when you're blending, this is the perfumer's technique. I've got some Lang Lang here, and when you're using your essential oils, take the tops off and put them down in the order that they're in your hand so that you get them back on in the right order. So I've got some Lang Lang there and some lemon there. So if I just smell the Lang Lang, too overpowering, it's like a headache in a bottle. When I put it with the lemon, then that cuts through it and it's really nice. But even so, I need to reduce the Lang Lang. So just watch. I'm sliding the bottle down my hand. So the Lang Lang is now about 1 inch below the lemon. So I now know roughly I want about 1/3 more lemon in my blend than the Lang Lang. And I've got big hands, so I can even get 3 bottles in. And I can spend maybe a week perfuming and doing the creative blending for brands. And I keep using the word perfumery, but it doesn't matter whether you're doing this for your medicinal blends or your leisure blends. It's all, the techniques are all the same. I'm not going to talk too much about the medicinal side today because you already know all that. This is about the art of blending. So one of the things that's really important, and you can see me do it there, a bit like the Queen waving, and you can see I'm just agitating them. If you find your wrist is quite stiff, then you can circle. But the key thing is, this is so important, the key thing is to breathe normally. People think you smell through your nose, but you don't. You smell in your mind. So it's a matter of breathing normally and thinking about what you're smelling. If you try and smell just here, then within a few minutes, you'll barely be able to smell anything. And remember, put your tops on back, because you've kept them in the same order, so that's really easy to do. One or two more, and then lemongrass. A little secret with lemongrass. Students often get upset when they blend something that doesn't smell nice, and my secret is always to put some lemongrass in. It is big and powerful, but almost everybody loves lemongrass, and if you've got a blend that's gone a bit wrong, then lemongrass sorts it out. Again, it's very inexpensive. And that's quite important, because when you're using oils that are a good price, you can afford to make your client a little bit of something up to take home. But if you've used oils that are 20 or 30 pounds a bottle, then you can't. Some other nice oils here. Fennel, aniseed, that's a really nice oil. And fennel's really modern. So for those of you who follow the trends, the superfoods are really in at the moment, and fennel is fantastic. It's good for clients who've got IBS, but I did say I wouldn't talk too much about the medicinal side. I've got some geranium here. Geranium is the classic oil for commercial blending, certainly. So if you look at all your little soap company and all your Neal's Yard, if you look at a lot of their everyday products, hand washes, hair washes, they almost all have geranium in. A lot of people think you have to pay extra for the very expensive geraniums because they vary. You don't. Marks and Spencer level geranium is absolutely fine. Hoe wood. Hoe wood is a good alternative to rosewood. I don't use either sandalwood or rosewood because they're potentially involved in forest deforestation. So hoe wood's a good one. It doesn't really have any medicinal qualities, but it's a low note, and it's really, really nice. And I'm also always looking for new oils that might be quite interesting, and I've just found this one, Buddha wood. So I need to research it a bit more, but it smells really delicious, very much like sandalwood. So I can see I'll be using that. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is talk about how you blend. And one of the key things commercially, which is the area of blending that I'm involved in, is that the fragrance has to last. So I want you to imagine that you've got a cupboard, a filing cabinet in front of you with 3 drawers. So we have top notes, yeah, you know, citruses. Middle notes, those are the fruits, the flowers and the grasses generally. And low notes, which would be your woods and your roots, your frankincense, your cedarwood, your myrrh, your benzoin. And unfortunately the oils don't fit neatly into the drawers. So you might get a lavender, for instance, which is very light, and at the top of it's still a middle note, but it's at the top of your filing cabinet. You could get a patchouli, for instance, which is in the middle of your middle drawer, or it could be low. And when I explain to students, these are the top notes, these are the middle, these are the bottom, they often say to me, but that textbook says neroli's a middle note, or which it is, or neroli's a top note, or patchouli's a low note. I say, well, I respect your view, because if we're just talking perfumery, if you perceive it as a low note or a top note, that's fine. That's okay. But certainly for those of you doing your IFPA exams, grasses, leaves and flowers, middle notes, woods and roots, bottom notes, and citruses, top notes. They fit neatly in those drawers. Once you've passed your exam, whatever you're smelling, whatever you're feeling, it goes. There's no rules. And equally, different aromatherapy masters in different countries and different books will put the oils in different places. Sometimes that's scientifically based because of how it's grown or the composition of the oil, but often it's just their perception. And I just say, I respect your view. That's fine. I don't necessarily agree, but that's fine. So the message I'm trying to get across as a creative blender, it is about your mind and your heart and your intuition, not what you've read in a textbook. So why is vertical blending important? Because it makes the oil stay on your skin. So people will say to me, but I'm doing a citrus oil. I want a citrus blend because I want to be really, really alert. Yeah, that's fine, but you still want you want to be able to smell it when you walk in the room or when you smell your skin. So you need to add a low note. And with something like a citrus blend, if I didn't want to spoil the fragrance of the citrus, then I could use a middle note such as lemongrass, which obviously is lemony, or I could just put a touch of myrrh or hoe wood, which don't have a strong smell. But myrrh in particular, that's a perfumer's friend or a blender's friend, because myrrh will actually fix your blend without spoiling it. So often people get the perfect blend and they say, but I've missed a top note or I've missed a bottom note. Just think about which one you use and you'll be fine. So I am talking blending here, but I'll also just show you some little tricks. So I've got some Coffee Mate here. It's very glycerine rich. People think it's dairy, it's not. Glycerine's a humectant, so when you see the adverts about improves the appearance of your fine lines, glycerine is one of the ingredients. So I'm just going to put some in there. And some of you will be familiar with them. I won't say the name, but it begins with E, a top spa brand. And their bath cream, and they're not the only people to do bath cream, their bath cream is about £40 for a small Kilner jar. This is how you make it. So we've put the Coffee Mate in there. And if you don't believe me, go and have a bath in Coffee Mate. When you get out, you'll feel like you've put moisturiser all over you. But now I've got a loose powder and I've got to get the essential oils in. So how do I do that without making it go all splodgy? My secret technique is to use sugar lumps. So you just put the essential oils onto the sugar lumps. So I'm going to use some of the Buddha wood because I like the look of that and I haven't yet used it. And this hasn't got a dropper in. Got to be careful. That is lovely, isn't it? Look at the colour of that. So that's my low note. My middle note, because I want this to be really musky. My middle note is patchouli, and this one is a really good patchouli. Patchouli, they say, if you get a bad one, can smell like the essence of old hippie, but a good patchouli really is beautiful. And I use patchouli a lot, particularly, which I'll tell you later, in my recipe for Poor Man's Rose. And then I need some citrus, so I am going to use some, I had some lemon out, didn't I? Where's it gone? Well, you can't smell it anyway. So I'd put a citrus on, so lemon or orange, and then I just put it in my bath cream. I put it in a polythene bag or a Kilner jar, and I shake it regularly over a week or so, and it has infused. Those of you who are members of IFPA or any of the other accredited bodies will know that you can't use essential oils for treatment internally. So if, as a practicing aromatherapist, no essential oils internally. As a cook and a hobbyist, and for myself, just to give you an idea, if you like your cocktails, put icing sugar in here, or even better, a mixture of icing sugar and salt. Use the same technique with your essential oils and infuse your salt and your sugar, and then you put honey on a plate, put your cocktail glass in the honey and then into your infused mixture, and it's gorgeous. Icing sugar infused with ginger is out of this world. But again, I stress, for treatment, no essential oils internally. But if you want to bake, then you can infuse your flour, you can infuse your icing sugar, you can infuse your salt, and do all sorts of fun things. And if you are doing that, make sure you get food grade oils, so NHR oils, or those of you who know IFPA, a lady called Laura Hoy is absolutely superb. So that's your bath cream. Pack it up in a Kilner jar and off you go. And that's the vertical blend. So the teaching point is that when you are blending, you must always do a vertical blend. So even if you want your blend to be all citruses, you still need to put a touch of the low note in to hold it, because if you are blending professionally, you want that fragrance to last. So the next rule of blending is balance. So I already touched on that before. Oil is very, very difficult to blend with, because if oils were people, and I like to think of them like people, I like to think of them with energy, peppermint is the person at the party that would dominate, but spearmint, oh, it's just delicious. So my next recipe, just to demonstrate this, is a salt one. So I've got some sea salt. Let's just get the top off that. Actually, just bear with me, I've got some more salt. There it is. My Maldon sea salt. If you're doing this sort of thing with kids, you can actually use dishwasher salt, because if you think about it, dishwasher salt, just check the ingredients to make sure it's got no chemicals for keeping it dry. Dishwasher salt is designed to go on your glasses and your plates and for you to eat it, so it's fine. So if I'm doing this, I do some work with special needs. If you're doing this type of fun activity with and you're giving away the materials, then dishwasher salt is fine. But if you're doing it for yourself, then the salt flakes are absolutely fabulous. So the blend here, I am actually going to use some spearmint, and with the salt you can actually put it straight in. If you want it to blend a bit smoother, then you make a little mixture of washing up liquid and vodka. So about a tablespoon of a mixture of washing up liquid and vodka, then put your essential oils in and mix it into your salt. This spearmint really is, I just can't tell you how lovely spearmint is to use. And because you don't train with it, it's usually not one that people are that familiar with. And then I'm just going to put a little bit of orange in there. Actually, no, I'm going to use grapefruit. Why would you use grapefruit instead of orange or lemon? Well, in marketing terms, it's just more glamorous. Lemon, orange, yeah, I get that every day. Grapefruit is more glamorous. Grapefruit's associated with detox, so whether it's detox because of relationships or life, or whether it's detox physically and mentally, grapefruit's a lovely oil to use. And for those of you who go onto the beauty side, grapefruit's believed to help with cellulite, so it's a really good all-round oil. And interestingly, it's incredibly inexpensive. So when you see grapefruit way above orange or lemon, it's not that it's better quality or anything, it's just that generally it's dealt in smaller quantities, so it's very expensive. So we'll just put a bit of grapefruit. So that's spearmint and grapefruit. And the teaching point there is to use spearmint, not peppermint, and to use something that's slightly more interesting. So the spearmint is at the top of middle notes, and the grapefruit is obviously a top note. So there I'm going to add a little bit of benzoin. That benzoin doesn't pour very well. Let's look at a benzoin that pours well. There it is. And you can see that was, you probably see that's a much lighter colour than the heavier one. So that is actually a better quality because it's very heavy and thick. But for the work I'm doing, which is blending, then I need a less expensive one. Though this isn't that cheap, it's an Oshadi one. And I do move oils around a lot. I'm not particularly loyal to any one brand. And there's this myth that, oh, well, you have to buy, that brand's better quality than that. No, it's not. It depends where they've got their oils from, whether you've got the bottom of the barrel when they poured your bottle. It changes so much. And I noticed, I didn't actually answer it, but I noticed on one of the forums recently, people said, brand A is really poor quality because it's so cheap. So they use price as a reason for saying it's low quality. Well, that's the doTERRA way of thinking. If it's expensive, it must be good quality. In aromatherapy, it's not true. You've all been to the super or the farmer's market and bought potatoes. If you buy 4 potatoes, they're very expensive. If you buy the 25 kilo sack, they are next to nothing. And this is a food ingredient, or food and flavours ingredient. So the volume that the particular supplier you use buys determines the price. Obviously quality as well, but price is not an indicator of quality. And just because you go to a small operator and or a small dealer and they say, oh yes, but we're special and we pick them out, that's not always the case. And you're probably used to looking at the analysis. Yes, that tells you so much, but believe me, your nose is better than any computer analysis going. You can tell so much from the smell. You can tell whether it's a good oil. You can tell whether it talks to you, and you can tell whether it's going to be good. So we've got the salt here. So just a bit of fun. I've just put some spearmint and some grapefruit there, and a little bit of benzoin. It's still got a very high smell, but it's balanced. So that was the second message, balancing. So if I'd used peppermint, I could have only used what I call a whisper. A whisper is when I put a tiny bit on a stick and or a glass rod and just put it in. For my beautiful salt here, I've got some botanicals. You have to be very careful of just going into your garden or doing what people say to me. Oh, I've just been to India and I've brought back these wonderful plants and I want to put them in. You have to be so careful. Years ago, I made soap for Hampton Court Palaces, and I was lucky enough to be able to go around with the gardener and pick all the roses that I wanted, and then we put the petals in alcohol, made a tincture which went into the soap. But you have to be so careful, because if the ground is polluted, which in lots of areas of London it is, you do have to be careful. So one of the ways of ensuring the quality of what you're putting in your products is buying food grade products. So this is tea. I've got amaretto cherry. I don't know whether you can see, lovely red colours, and it smells like amaretto. This one is Mountain View. I won't go through all the herbs, but you can see it's got lavender and cornflower, raspberry and vanilla. Yeah, bits of raspberry. So looking in the cook shops, looking in the food shops, Fruits of the Forest there, that's got bits of lemon peel in. If you go to a company such as Just Ingredients, you can buy the bits of lemon peel. You can buy it powdered or you can buy it in bits like that. Another good company is Baldwin's of London for their dried herbs. So I'm just going to open this, and it's quite funny when I love the tea stalls at the craft shows, and they're always saying, do you want to try it? And I'm saying, no, I just want to look at it. This is my cherry one. And have a look at that, how beautiful that is. And I'm also going to put some of my gold flakes in. Another thing that you can put in, which is really good for your skin, is seaweed. You know the seaweed paper that you make the sushi from? Cut it up very small into strips, and that looks absolutely fabulous. If you've got children, then you can add, go and get your inspiration from Lush. You can add all the chocolate sprinkles, and I even add cocoa, and I call that, oh, and then those black food colouring. If you're using food colouring, you need to put it on the sugar lump to get it in. And I call that dinosaur poo bath salts. You can make princess bath salts by putting glitter in. Be very careful, you must use cosmetic glitter, not craft glitter. So the cheapest place for that is somewhere like Superdrug, the little glittery eyeshadows. So I've got my gold in there. Another thing that you can put in, you're probably familiar with these. This one's vitamin B, but vitamin C is better for your skin. And we've got one here with the magnesium tablets. Magnesium's really fashionable in the toiletry area at the moment, magnesium and cannabis. So you can actually crush these up and then put them into your bath salts to give a fizz. If you're working with children, popping candy that you get online for your cakes is good as well. So I can get magnesium in just by crushing a magnesium tablet. Here's the sprinkles for the children. So you can do lots of things, but for an adult, I'm keeping it very much botanical based. And the way that I display it is to go to the charity shop, and I know because my mum and dad have just died, we've got all this china that is absolutely worthless but had great sentimental value. If you go to any china shop, you'll find lots of beautiful, beautiful little cups which nobody ever uses anymore because we all use our mugs. And I buy those cups and they'll sell them for like 10p if they've got no saucer. They're glad that you take them away. You put your bath salts in, fasten it up with some polythene and a ribbon, and you've got a beautiful, beautiful gift. And the other thing that's quite fun to use are edible cake decorations. So when I've put my salt in the nice little cup, then I can put the edible cake decoration on the top and it looks really pretty. So that's one way of blending. But just be creative, and anything, if it's okay to put in your tummy, it's okay to put on your skin. And a lot of the health benefits are just the same. If you're into fashion and you're blending at the moment, superfoods are the big deal, and all the greens. I've also got, I won't do it now, but I've also got pea protein. I could add powder, I could add that in as well. And when for products that are being marketed, the fact that that's got raspberry, rose, lemon, salt, seaweed, gold, it's a good marketing story. It mustn't just do you good, it's got to look good. Okay, so what's the next rule of blending? So we've done vertical blending, and we've done balance, and we've done power. The next one is money. And you see it all the time. What's the best oil for women's problems? What's the best oil for skin problems? Rose, rose, rose. I love my rose. I often say to therapists, do you know how much that blend cost? No. But believe me, when you ask a beauty salon owner how much did that blend for the face cost, they know down to a penny. They know how much it costs to have the towels washed. And as aromatherapists, we have to, if we want to make a living out of it, have to be the same. You cannot just be giving your customer rose. I've got some beautiful rose from China there. And people imagine oils from China are not so good quality, but it's remarkable. I don't know whether you remember, about 3 years ago, this country ran out of rosehip. So I saw some rosehip in China and I had it tested here, and it was better quality in terms of analysis than anything I could get from Europe. But the client wouldn't have it because it came from China. You have to trust your instincts. An oil I do use a lot is walnut. That's actually from Asda. and they've just stopped doing their clear coconut. But I've always got my eyes open. The Polish Kalina oil, which is from Poland. If you go in the Polish delicatessen, that is a gorgeous oil to use for the skin. So lots and lots of fun. Okay, let's look at a poor man's rose. So I'm going to use some of I'm going to make a rose facial oil. I've got some of my walnut oil there. Safflower is another one I use a lot. Very inexpensive and really good. Now I did have some sea buckthorn, didn't I? I can't see it right now. So I want to make my rose alternative, my poor man's rose. So I'm going to use some geranium to start with. Patchouli I need. Geranium I need. Rose geranium, though it doesn't really matter which one you use. And then I need a touch of orange. So geranium is the main ingredient, very similar to rose. And then, so that's the middle, effectively the middle note of the rose. And just going back to notes, people say, well, what do you mean? The best way that I can explain it, well, certainly for those of you who like a glass of wine, is when you have a glass of wine, you smell it first. That's the top notes, the small molecules coming off. Then you taste it. That's the middle note on the palate. And then hopefully if it's good, you go, when you put it down, you go, that's the low note, that's the bit that's left, that's lasting. So the geranium is the middle part of the rose. The patchouli gives me the bottom of the rose. And then rose just has a little edge. So I'm going to use some orange just to finish that off. You'll notice I'm doing this all by eye. And that's how I work, by eye to start with. So I'll do it by eye, and if I'm designing blends for a customer, so I'm literally, yeah, that's nice, I like that. Put it in a tub, number one, then I go again. Obviously I keep a record of what's gone in it, but I don't keep a record of what proportions are at this stage. So then I give the client maybe 8 choices of blends, and then they come back and then they say, oh, I like number 1 and number 3. I then take number 1 and 3 and then work on them doing different levels of the different oils. And at that point, I'm counting the drops and using all my, well, you should see me, I look like a glass factory, and using all my measuring sticks. But at this stage, it's fast and it's about instinct. And if I was faffing around measuring, that would take away the creative process. I have to get in the zone, knock them all out, send them to the customer. And the other tip I've got when you're blending for a customer is don't tell them what you've put in it. So they just get a box with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on. If you tell the client what's in it, they make a decision based on what is in it. So typically, or recently I had a client, whatever you do, don't make me anything with Lang Lang. No, nothing with Lang Lang. But actually she chose the 2 that had Lang Lang in it, because a whisper of Lang Lang, which is where you just touch a whisper is you just touch a bit onto a stick and then mix it in. A whisper of Lang Lang just gives that intense floral note at a really good price, but you don't smell the Lang Lang. And that's the fun of blending, because if I just work with fragrance oils and I mixed apple and orange, you get a smell that was just apple and orange. But the beauty of essential oils is like they're alive. So when you mix apple and orange on essential oils, not that we do those, but you know what I mean, then you can get something completely different. And you can get something different with different batches, with different suppliers. So that's another reason why I'm not sticking to one supplier, because I want to enjoy like I enjoy eating food from all around the world, I want to experience the different essential oils. So Poor Man's Rose is patchouli, geranium, geranium's your middle, and then you've got your orange. And if it wasn't, because some people like a really tea rose type smell, then you might put a whisper of Lang Lang in. Okay, so that's Poor Man's Rose. Let's look at Poor Man's Neroli. And this time I'm going to make a grooming powder or a deodorizing powder for your carpet or your furniture. So baking soda or bicarbonate of soda. You can actually, it's bicarbonate of soda. This is slightly heavier. The stuff that you get in the supermarket for cooking can be a bit voluminous. That means it floats everywhere, so it can make your furniture a bit dusty when you use it. So I've got the bicarbonate of soda, and then I need my sugar lumps again to add in my oils. We did it earlier with the bath cream, and that is smelling gorgeous already. So Poor Man's Neroli, I mean, who would think that you had neroli on your carpets? Poor Man's Neroli is, the secret ingredient is green mandarin. Now, this one's from NHR Oils. They're a good supplier, and if you want to play around with your oils for your leisure time, for your personal use, where you're going to infuse mayonnaise or salt or sugar or whatever, then NHR Oils are all certified for food. But again, for treatment, you must not use oils internally. So I've got some green mandarin here, and I'm going to put it on my sugar lump. You would think that green mandarin would come out sharper than normal mandarin, red mandarin, but it doesn't. It comes out quite lemony. And I also need a little bit of bergamot. So we've got green mandarin, a little bit of bergamot. Tangerine's a good ingredient for this, and also a touch, just a little touch of Lang Lang. So I'm running out of space on my sugar lumps. I've got another sugar lump, a little bit of Lang Lang. So your Poor Man's Neroli is green mandarin, bergamot, tangerine, and a little bit of Lang Lang. Lang Lang gives it that floral note, but you have to go by nose because some green mandarins are floral enough. At this point, when I'm making a Poor Man's Neroli, people often say, why haven't you put petitgrain in? Well, the reason I haven't put petitgrain goes back to the second rule of blending, which was all about weight and power. And petitgrain has no power and no weight. So if you've got a client that's very delicate and stressed, then by all means use petitgrain in the blend. But if you're making for products that are going out and about, you're wasting your money on petitgrain because it's like the little shy, retiring person in the corner. It doesn't have enough oomph to actually make a difference on your products. But you know, if you want to put it in for fun, it's fine. And I promise you, people who don't, obviously if you tell a therapist one of those is real neroli and one of them is Poor Man's Neroli, they probably would tell. But I promise you, if you don't tell them, they have no idea. And I think, well, where did you get the idea from that? I'll tell you where I got the idea from for this. And there's a very, very famous aromatherapy brand, and they do a whole neroli range. So I had a client said, I want to do a neroli range too. Can you go and get all the samples and make me something very similar? So yeah, that smells like neroli. Beautiful. I had the product analysed, and I could tell, you could obviously, because people have to put the full ingredients on the back. That neroli, even though it had a picture of neroli, and it was, so this is a very reputable company, it was advertised as their orange flower range or neroli range, I can promise you that when that neroli went past that blend, the formulator went like that, because there was barely, if any, neroli in at all. And it was the green mandarin and the tangerine and that Lang Lang. And that's how they were getting the really beautiful smell of neroli. So in fact, the Poor Man's Neroli was more intense than the real thing, because neroli on its own, depending on which one you buy, can be a bit light. Two more rules. So that's your bicarbonate soda. So you keep the sugar lumps in. If you're doing this for the floor, to be honest, lemongrass and geranium's a better blend, and it'll make your house smell absolutely wonderful. You probably wouldn't put a neroli blend on your carpet, but my goodness, it's beautiful. And then you just sprinkle the bicarb soda all over the carpet, leave it. It's a good thing to do when you're going away for the weekend. Do it on the Friday night and then hoover up on the Sunday night. And it picks up dirt, it's deodorizing and cleansing. So absolutely beautiful. One of my favourite products. You can also use it as a dry shampoo, and you can use it as a grooming powder for your animals. I saw a debate today about cats and blends, and yes, you have to be very, very careful with cats, but with dogs, and remember, as a qualified aromatherapist, you're not qualified to do veterinary aromatherapy, but that doesn't stop you advising your clients and letting them do the blends on their animals themselves. And the rule is it goes by weight. So my dog's 2 stone. So if an average blend is for a 10 stone person, then I just do the pro rata amounts. And I just let the dog smell it. And if the dog likes it, then use it. If it doesn't, then don't. So the last one, so we've just done money. The last one is eco. So when you're blending, particularly for some clients, eco issues are really, really important. I showed you the Buddha oil, which is an alternative to sandalwood, but I need to research it. Himalayan cedarwood is my current favourite, and Ho, all alternatives to sandalwood and rosewood. Then there's other issues with tea tree, so you've got to check sustainability. People think it's about whether an oil is organic or not. I have clients that insist on organic, but one thing to remember is that organic, if you say to everybody, if you say to students in particular, what does organic mean? What's an organic oil? Certified organic. No. When you're doing your treatments and your blends, you can say, where's my salt? This is an organic blend because I've used organic tea. I don't know whether the Maldon salt is, no, I don't think that's Soil Association, but there's a big difference. If you're using 100% natural, that means animal or plant material, obviously plant in our case, then it is organic. So the true definition of organic, so you can quite rightly, there's no problem with it saying that this is organic. Obviously, if you're selling to somebody like Boots, then they will go with the marketing definition of organic and they will want it to be certified organic. But all my essential oils, some of those oils have got the Soil Association badge on, some of them haven't, but they are all organic because they're all 100% plant oil. So I think that brings me to the end of my session. So the rules for blending, the most important one is vertical. So even if you're doing a wind down blend for the end of the evening with, I don't know, frankincense and patchouli, then you still need a bit of a top note to give you depth. If you're doing a citrus blend, you need depth. The only time we do horizontal blending is if you're treating somebody. So for a cold, you might use tea tree, chamomile and lavender. That's a horizontal blend. For eczema, you might use chamomile and lavender. That's a horizontal blend. But the blending for your clients, for holistic blending and for commercial blending, it must be a vertical blend. So it has depth and it stays on the skin. You can still smell it a few hours later. The second rule is making sure you're balancing. So I tend to think, everybody has different ways. I tend to think of essential oils like people. So the peppermint, tea tree, they're all really powerful. Even chamomile is quite powerful. So you have to blend the amounts carefully. I usually do that second. So I push out all my creative ideas. decide which ones the client likes, and then revisit them, and then start playing around with the balance. And then we've got cost. So think about your poor man's solutions. Don't just automatically go for the most expensive oil. It doesn't do your client any favours, because they probably can't afford to go out and buy it. And in order for you to do CPD, ongoing training, and actually make a living out of this business, you have to think about your costs of a blend. And the difference of a blend with rose in and a blend with poor man's rose will be as much as £4 or £5 for that one treatment. Big difference. And then we've also got the eco issues. So when you're blending, think about eco issues. I've got clients that actually think about how far the oil has come, so I've got to actually tell them whereabouts in the world it's come from. And don't let people tell you which is the best brand. The example I give there is tea. So I am lucky enough to be given some very smart tea in China, which is the top tea in China. I've had tea in Dubai, tea in England, tea in India. Everybody will say this is the best quality, but the taste is completely different, and some are acceptable, some are not. Sauvignon from New Zealand, from Africa, from Chile, completely different, but each one of them may be the best quality. So don't let other people tell you what's the best blend and what's the best quality. Yes, look at your analysis sheets, but most importantly, use your nose. Your mind and your instinct will actually tell you what's a good quality oil. Don't be sidetracked with price. And the final one is eco issues. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed that. If you want any information, so for instance, I haven't really touched on allergens, we could cover that. If you want any information, just get hold of, just email me. And once again, I'm sorry for the late start. Thank you very much. Bye.